Hi, everybody. So we've spent a lot of time throughout this semester talking about all of the different parts of an essay and how you can assemble it from the introduction to the body paragraphs, thinking about how to integrate research and transition between your ideas. What I want to talk about today is how you can bring things to an end and how you can write an effective conclusion to your essay. Now, this is actually the part of the essay that I find most challenging. I tend to put a lot of time into thinking about how to put together my introductions. I feel like throughout the revision process that I often do a good job of putting together strong body paragraphs, but thinking of the best way to wrap things up is something I consistently find challenging. So I'm going to share with you a few of the techniques that I've learned and a few of the frameworks that have worked for me to help me put together better conclusions. The maxim that I want to emphasize for the conclusion is this: look back, look forward. That's really what the conclusion does. It's the bridge for your reader out of your text. It's your last chance to make an impression on them and to ensure that the message that you want to communicate to them is delivered, but it's also an opportunity for you to try to shape how they think about things in the future. So a lot is really at stake in the conclusion. What you want to do in that is look backwards at what you've already done throughout the rest of the paper, and then look forwards to new lines of inquiry that you think your research has opened up for your reader going forward. So there are four main things that a conclusion section of an essay ought to accomplish. The first thing is that it should summarize your argument for your reader. You want to provide just a terse explanation of what main claim you are trying to get across. You should remind your reader about what you've already done. So if there's anything that you want to stress or emphasize, this is the time to do it. Any takeaway messages that you want to ensure that your reader remembers, even if they forget everything else, you ought to bring up in the conclusion. This is your last chance to leave a legacy. Finally, you want your concluding section to lead the reader to think about why what you're talking about matters, to think about the bigger picture. In your essay, you can only focus on so many things. This is particularly true if you're writing a short essay of something like 3 to 5 pages. It's impossible for an essay to have accomplished everything you would like it to. In the conclusion, there's a chance for you to gesture towards some of the problems that you just didn't have time to solve, but that you hope that your reader might think about and develop further. So here are a few different strategies to wrap things up. One of the best things that you can do at the end of a conclusion is to conclude with a relevant or thought-provoking quotation. Here's an example from Kant. Borrowing compelling and eloquent sentences from other great writers and thinkers is a good technique. It's something that works well at the beginning of your paper, and it's something that can work well at the end. By using a strong quotation, you take a little bit of pressure off of yourself. You don't have to be the one to come up with the beautifully written phrase. All you have to do is just find it and make sure that it makes sense for the issue that you're talking about. Another strategy that you can take in your conclusion is to offer a solution to some problem that your paper discussed. So something like this. In an essay, you don't really want to write any checks that you can't cash. You don't want to raise any questions that you don't answer. If you haven't answered some of the questions raised in your paper in the body paragraphs, you really should make sure that you answer them by the end. The good thing is, in your conclusion, you don't have to go into too much detail. So your paper might be entirely focused on a problem, and you can just sort of tease the answer in the conclusion. That can be a good way to go about it. some other strategies that can be effective for your concluding paragraphs. A great way to end is to finish off with a thought-provoking question. This is a good way to gesture outside of the paper towards bigger picture concerns. So something like this. This can really help you to leave an emotional impact in the mind of your readers. It's a great strategy to take. Another good one is just to speak broadly about the value or significance of the issue you were talking about. Right? I've said before that you generally want to think narrow when you're working on your essays. And this is a really good and important practice. In your conclusion, you can start to broaden things again and think more about why what you're talking about matters to someone. Why it's not just a parochial or narrow-minded concern. Here are a few other techniques you can use. One is to hearken back to something that you said in the introduction. So if you raised some issue or problem at the beginning of the text, if you started off your essay by wondering about some debate or some issue, you might want to link back to it right here at the end so your essay feels like a unified whole. This is something that you can really do in the revision process and check, what did you actually say in the introduction, and make sure that your conclusion actually matches it. You can also end with a suggestion for change or some prediction about what might happen in the future. So something like this. Now, the good thing about the conclusion is no one's really going to hold you to this. So even though you don't want to make any outlandish predictions, you can still go a little bit beyond what you would feel comfortable doing in the body paragraphs. You don't necessarily have to back up fully everything that you're saying in the conclusion to the same extent that you did in the body paragraph. Use your judgment for how far afield you feel comfortable going. Here are a few guidelines that I suggest that you should keep in mind as you're putting together your conclusion. The first is to make sure that you don't introduce any substantial new material. Another way of thinking about this is you don't want your conclusion to be just another body paragraph. All of the main supporting points in your essay you should really have in your body paragraphs. Your conclusion should be focused on wrapping things up and not just squeezing in one extra point. It's also important not just to repeat what you said in the introduction verbatim. It's important to look back, to remind your reader of what you've done, to summarize your main argument, but it should have some difference. Your reader's gone through a bit of a journey with you, and the way that you talk about your topic should reflect that something ought to have changed from the beginning of the paper to the end, at least in your reader's understanding of the topic. The last thing to consider is that it's important for you not to undercut your own expertise. So one of the things that can go wrong here is where you say something to the effect of, these are just my opinions, I'm not really sure, I could be totally wrong about this. Stay confident in your argumentation until the end. Don't suddenly, after taking paragraph after paragraph of using research to support your claims, don't at the very end then just leave your reader with the impression that you actually didn't know what you were talking about. After you've gone through the whole research process, you are a little bit of an expert in your topic. Quite possibly more of an expert than your reader is. So stay assured throughout the whole process. Here's an example of a template that you could use in order to put together your concluding paragraph. This is a little bit clunky. It's not the most elegant construction ever, but it's something that you can use to get started at the very least. It may be that something else makes sense for your paper, but if you're not really sure how to tie things off, try using this, see if it works for you. Best of luck with the rest of your essays. I'm really excited to see what you turn out.